Hey guys, it's Cece, and welcome to a series of unfortunate discussions. Today I am here to talk all about a series of unfortunate events. Well, a very specific part of a series of unfortunate events. The Netflix series is now officially here, and as the series that began my love of reading, it was only fair that I dedicated a few videos to talking about it. Today I'm going to be talking about a couple of very specific things. I'm going to be talking about the first book in a series of unfortunate events, The Bad Beginning by Lemony Snicket, of course, and I will be discussing the first two episodes of the Netflix series, A Bad Beginning Parts 1 and 2. So if it has to do with the beginning of the series, if it starts us all off, if it has the words bad and beginning in the title, that is what I'm going to be discussing today, and let's just jump right in. And first, I'm going to start by talking all about the book. The Bad Beginning is a book that I read for the first time many years ago. I read it when I was about 8 or 9, which means it has been over 10 years, and it is the series that first got me invested, really invested in reading. I was a reader pre a series of unfortunate events, but I was not a dedicated reader. I picked and I chose, and I read what was given to me, but a series of unfortunate events is the thing that I read voraciously, the thing that I requested my mother go and purchase for me, and the first time that I got on the internet to find out when further books would be released so that I could get them that day. That's just in case you were looking for a little bit of background as far as my experience with a series of unfortunate events. Now the thing is, I have not read this series again since I read it that first time. I read the last couple of books, 11, 12, and 13, as well as the companion, the Beatrice letters, as they were released in the following years, but I read those first 9, 10 books or so all in a row when I was 8 or 9 years old. So this was sort of like re-experiencing it on a semi-first time sort of basis. I remembered a lot of the details of the first book, but I was still going in not remembering a lot of my feelings about the series, besides the fact that I was passionate about it. I wound up re-rating this book about 3.5 stars. I don't know what the rating was that I gave it when I was 8 or 9. According to Goodreads, it was around a 3 or a 4, but Goodreads didn't exist when I was 8, so as far as discussing this, what a great beginning to a series. I think this is such a great introduction to the characters that you're going to be seeing, the general vibe of the story, and all of the potential for where this series could go. All in this one book. I am now, as I was when I was a kid, in love with Lemony Snicket, aka Daniel Handler's writing style. I think that it is witty and intelligent and just so well done. I loved it when I was a kid, and I definitely still love it even all these years later. I still adore Violet. Violet and Klaus were both characters I loved when I was a kid, but Violet especially was a very formative female character for me to have read about at that age, and so it was really fun to return to seeing her again because she made a big impact in my life, especially when I was reading the series for the first time. Olaf remains sinister and terrifying to me even as an adult. Over time, I had sort of been convinced that perhaps I'd been misled. I only thought he was terrifying as a kid because I was a kid, and that maybe he was a bit more whimsical than I originally thought. This was probably influenced by the way they decided to portray him in the movies, but rereading the series, I can confirm, not really whimsical, just pretty terrifying and sinister. One of my favorite things about the series overall is the portrayal of the Baudelaire's relationship to adults. So over and over again, especially when you read middle grade, I think that there is this question that comes up, even in YA, why don't these people go to adults for assistance? And I think a lot of the time that answer is not provided for you. You don't know why they don't go to the adults. But what I think is so interesting about the series of unfortunate events series is how their relationship with adults changes over time. I think one of the main things is that the adults in this series do not treat the Baudelaires as full-grown people. And no, they are not full-grown, but they are definitely people with feelings and opinions that are valid. But the adults in this series do not take those opinions or feelings seriously, which leads the Baudelaires to feel less and less like they can rely on anyone outside of themselves. Even when they come to adults with the fact that they are being abused in this household, they are being ignored or told that they are overreacting just because they are children. And I don't want to go too much more into why I think that that is an incredibly valid storyline, but I have always appreciated it, and I definitely loved it even more as an adult. Treating children as individuals with opinions that are valid, that should be listened to, I think is just a very important thing to do when you're talking to kids, because they will eventually become adults. There is not a day when all of a sudden the things that they say matter, so what they say matters from the beginning, and they should be taken seriously. And that is just something that I love about the series overall, is the fact that it talks about that, and especially their relationship with Mr. Poe. So I love that, but then my favorite moment in the first book is definitely Violet making the grappling hook. What a moment. What a character, and I just love her more going forward. Anyway, probably talked way too long about the book, but this is a series I love, so whatever. Let's just jump into talking about the show. First, we are going to do some very quick thoughts. I'm just gonna shout off a couple of things. The intro is a thing that I really enjoy. The first time I watched it, I wasn't sure, but now I think it's infectious. It's currently in my head as we speak. I think it sets a great tone for the show, and I think Lemony Snicket would be a huge fan of it. The dedication at the beginning is just yes. Yes, 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 yes. So at the beginning of every single book, Lemony Snicket dedicates that book to Beatrice, who we know is his lost love, and who we also know is dead. And I love that they didn't try to explain it through anything else. They just put the dedication on the screen with like a typewriter. Beautifully done. I loved it. The casting. Originally not my favorite, but it is growing on me. More on that later. Sunny is also growing on me, but I also have some concerns with Sunny. Obviously, they cannot do everything with like a real baby because Sunny does stuff that a baby cannot do. And I don't know that there was going to be a great way to indicate that Sunny, when she says gibberish, is speaking certain things. But I don't love the fact that sometimes the baby doesn't even open her mouth and they still have like baby noises playing over the top with the little subtitles. Especially in the first episode, it was really off-putting. I'm also not a huge fan of the times that they use CG to just like emphasize her character. I know that that's definitely gonna have to be added to later on. Like, I just finished reading The Miserable Mill yesterday, and obviously stuff happens in that a baby cannot do. Just the way that they're doing Sunny is not my favorite thing right now. I don't know what would have been a better way, but I'm not quite sold. And one last quick thought. I hated the fact that Count Olaf sang in episode 1. I hated it. No. Okay, on to some more discussion-y stuff. So easily my favorite part of this adaptation so far has got to be Lemony Snicket. When the casting was first announced and we were told that Patrick Warburton was going to be playing Lemony Snicket, I had severe doubts. Patrick Warburton just is not the person I pictured to be the distinguished and well-spoken Lemony Snicket. He is Kronk to me. He's a lot of other animated things, but he's also Kronk from The Emperor's New Groove. However, he is actually my favorite part of the entire show, and he has blown me out of the water. They have his really dark sense of humor. They have completely nailed the way that he speaks, often including direct quotes, which I think is a great choice. I also love that they are including some of the asides that Lemony Snicket has, where he mentions some of the things he's been doing while he's on the run. I love that they've been including that because I think it makes Lemony Snicket such a more relevant part of the story, which I think is going to be a great decision later on. Also, I love how they are including him in particular scenes. The way that certain scenes are set up, where it will go back and forth between the people communicating in the scene and Lemony Snicket providing a commentary, I think is a great way to include him. It makes him feel like your guide through the story, and that's exactly how Lemony Snicket, I think, is supposed to function, and I just think Patrick Warburton is doing it brilliantly. Oh, also, I love that they are including more stuff with Beatrice. I'm hoping that we will continue to get a lot of information about Beatrice and maybe some inclusion of some stuff from the Beatrice letters. That would all make me very happy. Joan Cusack as Justice Strauss is not a casting choice that I had considered, but as soon as I saw it, I knew it was going to be brilliant. I feel like I haven't seen Joan Cusack in that many things recently, and to see her show up in this and to just nail this part was so wonderful. Excellent casting, and I cannot wait to see some of the other casting choices that I've seen later on. I'm especially excited about Asif Manvi and the Reptile Room. Cannot wait. So let's talk about the casting of the kids. I said I was going to get back to casting. So I like Klaus more than Violet. Klaus is played by a guy named Louis Hines, I believe, and I think that he really is nailing his character. I'm slightly less sold on Melina Weissman as Violet. I think where Klaus really makes all of the fast-paced and more difficult lines from Klaus feel authentic, Melina Weissman is having a harder time doing that. Her lines just have a tendency to feel a lot more forced than Klaus's do, I think, and they also feel more rushed on occasion when the two of them are having a conversation. And I think this is especially noticeable when they are having a conversation, and Klaus really hits all of those correct moments, and Violet isn't quite as on. I do really like them. I'm still not sure about the fact that I think that they cast Violet really young, but I'm slowly growing to like them more and more, and I think I could really grow to love them by the end of this season even, or even as we go forward, hopefully with additional series. Okay, it's time to do it. It is time to talk about Neil Patrick Harris as Count Olaf. So, I'm still not quite there with Olaf. I just don't really love him yet. And by I don't love him, I mean I don't love the portrayal of him. Obviously, I do not love Count Olaf. He's evil, so. I think he is miles and miles superior to Jim Carrey, and I think that he has taken down the humor thing that these adaptations keep trying to put into Olaf really well. I think he's toned it down, which is good. Unfortunately, I still think that they are focusing way too much on Count Olaf as a humorous figure, and not enough on him as a villainous figure. Count Olaf is a ridiculous person, but the point is that the Baudelaires are also supposed to fear him, and us as an audience are supposed to fear him as well. And I think if we are constantly laughing at his antics, his fear factor goes way down. I do really like the fact that he's theatrical, especially as I've been rereading more into the series. I think that that is just part of his ego, which I appreciate, but I don't think that Neil Patrick Harris is hitting those sinister moments nearly as well. Especially some of the scenes that I think are supposed to be the most terrifying in the book, such as the moment when he hits Klaus, the moments when he puts Sunny in danger, and especially the moments where he is threatening Violet. I'm just not thinking that he's hitting those as sinister, and sometimes they feel almost on the verge of comical. I think the scene where he hits the sinister note the best is the moment where he hits Klaus in the first episode, but I'm just not quite there. I think that at the very end they took the edge off and made it funny again. So stuff like the song that I mentioned earlier, I don't think that hits the right notes at all, as well as the scene in which he slides across the table to give the raspberry cupcakes to the Baudelaires. I think that those were played off as way too funny and over the top for Olaf, and I think that going forward, I've seen Neil Patrick Harris play terrifying. He is fantastic in Gone Girl, and I really want him to bring some of those more sinister elements to Olaf going forward if I'm going to be pleased. So let's talk about the big change in the series. The big thing that happened at the end of episode 1 and that they are going to be incorporating moving forward, and that is the inclusion of some plot elements that do not appear in the books until book 9. I want to say that I'm a huge fan of this change. I think that it is such a good way to adapt this series because I think that the books start to feel a little repetitive as we go forward, and I think that a second season of this, getting into books 5 through 8, if we were to get that, we would start to really feel the repetitive nature of the stories, but I think including the secret society elements of these books is a great, great television adaptation move. So the thing is that in later books, in like 9 and 10, you start to learn about a secret society. The books go from feeling episodic and repetitive to revealing that there is a lot more going on than you possibly ever considered. And I think that what would have made the book stronger is the inclusion of those elements a little bit earlier, so I love that they are pulling that off in the series. The underground secret society that is holding the story together that makes it a great mix of both whimsical and a lot darker, and the indication that there is a lot more going on is working really well in my opinion. I have to admit, in the first episode, when Lemony Snicket at the very end is walking through the sewer system and you start to see the little signs that go to different places, when I saw the little placard that said Quagmire, I actually squealed and like put my hands to my chest a little bit because I knew some sort of big plot twist was going to be at the end of episode 1, but that is not what I thought it was going to be. And as we kept seeing these little names and stuff that are going to be included later on, I got so excited. I don't know how well that kind of thing is going to work for a casual viewer. Maybe that will make them more invested, but as a person who has read forward and knows a lot more of the story, that was thrilling to see some of those things being peppered in a little early. Also, I am now going to be looking for a lot more instances of VFD. They haven't really discussed this in the show yet, but it is a running thing in the books that VFD and things that start with those 3 letters become like a thing later on, so I'm going to be looking for them more. I don't know if people have started to do this. If they have started counting VFDs, or if they've noticed little things in the background, I would love links to like articles or posts about that. I'm really interested. Oh, and because of that, I loved the asides with Jacqueline and Gustave together. I think that those were another really great way of balancing the tone throughout the series. So now I want to talk overall aesthetic. The only thing that I liked about the 2004 A Series of Unfortunate Events movie was the aesthetic of the entire thing. The entire movie had a Victorian, almost steampunk vibe that really exemplified the fact that when you are reading the books, you spend a lot of time going, what time period is this? And when I did a trailer talk about the first Series of Unfortunate Events Netflix trailer, I mentioned the fact that I was very cautious and scared about the fact that the show seemed to have almost a Wes Anderson vibe. It made me really worried they were going to focus only on quirk and not at all on the grimness of the story. However, I've really come around to the general look of the show. The way the show looks is sort of anachronistic and odd, and while it doesn't quite give that what time is this vibe that the books do, I think that it does create sort of an odd atmosphere where you're not quite sure what's going on. Everything feels turned up a little bit, a couple of notches, to the point of it being almost surreal, and I really appreciated that. I also loved some of the color choices with both costume and sets. That was what I was worried about in the trailer, but I actually love the way they've done it. I really appreciate that the Baudelaires as costumed characters represent this colorful light amidst all the grim darkness of the rest of the scenery, and I definitely love that Justice Strauss's house became almost a safe haven from that monotonous feeling as well. And I'm really hoping that that color motif sort of thing is going to continue on in the reptile room. I'm anticipating Uncle Monty's house being a lot more colorful than Count Olaf's was, so looking forward to seeing some more stuff being done with color in the next few episodes. As a final thought, I want to admit something. When I first watched the first episode, I was not sold. I had a lot of positives, but I also had a lot more negatives. However, shortly after I watched the first episode, it was pointed out to me on a post on Tumblr that this show has the vibe of Pushing Daisies. If you don't know this already, Pushing Daisies is my favorite television show of all time. It is a show that uses whimsy and quirk to hide the much darker things going on. There are some incredibly gruesome murders throughout both seasons, but you don't really see that because the saturation is turned up so high and everyone's wearing cute clothes. And once it was pointed out to me that the show, whether intentionally or not, had a very strong Pushing Daisies aesthetic, so many of my negatives went out the window. It was like opening a door for me and seeing, oh, this is what they were going for, and I am so into that. The way the dialogue sounds especially just works so well from a Pushing Daisies perspective, and actually having that pointed out to me made me wonder if the reason Pushing Daisies is my favorite show is because I was being influenced by my love of A Series of Unfortunate Events, the book series, first. So maybe a lot of my opinions are being manipulated by my love for Pushing Daisies and the connections that I see between the two shows, but I'm kind of okay with that because it has suddenly made me a lot more positive about the show than I was before. I wasn't negative before by any means, but I was a lot more cautious going in, and now I think that I am going into every episode with a lot more enthusiasm, so that's probably a good thing. Okay, I think that those are all of the thoughts that I wanted to share about The Bad Beginning, both show and book. I think that that's about everything. What were your guys' thoughts? Because I know that a lot of you were really excited to hear some of mine. So how do you feel about the show? I want to hear your thoughts as well. Do you agree with me? How do you feel about the casting, the look, the way the dialogue sounds? Do you like Lemony Snicket? Do you like Neil Patrick Harris? I have a friend who also really loves A Series of Unfortunate Events, and she is a fan of Olaf, so curious to hear some other people's thoughts. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!